So for this person and everyone else out there who's stuck trying to find a career, what I'd say is like, think about what you're passionate about first. And then try to figure out, how can I make this work as a job? How can I get compensated for doing this? How do I find a career when everything in life is boring to me? I've tried college and self-study in the past, but I never finished anything. I've switched majors like 8 times and I was still unhappy. I just can't really see myself doing anything, to be honest. In the past 10 years, the only career fields I've worked on have been restaurants and clinics, working in the billing call center departments. I've hated them both because both are dead-end, low-paying, stressful, and soul-crushing. I don't care about being super rich. I just want to find something that pays decent and that also doesn't make me want to kill myself by the end of the week. This is something that I can absolutely empathize with. I had a period of time in my life when I was like, really felt like everything was sort of a dead end and nothing was really working for me. So let's take a look at this, because I think this is a really common problem. So nowadays, a lot of people struggle to find a career and find everything to be boring, right? So they're like, I tried this, I found it boring. I tried this, I found it boring. Like, how do I figure out like what kind of career to have? So I want to talk to you all a little bit about how we approach decision making and how to find the right career for you, okay? So the first thing is that we have this idea that like we need a career, right? And so like we're sort of like taught like societally that there is, oh God. So this is a really common problem that people have, right? They'll say like, how do I find the right career for me? Like I've tried this, I did this for a while and none of it really worked. I didn't enjoy it. How do I find the right career? So the first thing to understand is that we tend to think about a career, right? We say to ourselves like, oh, like I need a career of some kind. The other thing that tends to happen is if we look at how people make decisions, it's basically like monkey see, monkey do. So I remember I was working with a young patient of mine who had started to use substances, and so I was his addiction psychiatrist. And he had gone to a 30-day rehab, and he was trying to figure out, what to do with his life. And I was kind of asking him, okay, so like, what's your plan going forward? And he's like, well, I've got a buddy that works at an auto shop, so I think he can hook me up with a job. And so it was really interesting because as I talked to him, what I realized is like the options that he was considering are basically exactly what's in front of him. So we as human beings tend to be like very monkey see, monkey do. So like based on when we think about the options for like what we should do with ourselves, it tends to be based on things that are immediately available. Like, so I'm the child of 2 doctors and I grew up in a small town in East Texas where 3 out of 5 of the Indian kids in my class, like in my grade, there were like 5 Indian kids that were in my grade in the entire city. 3 of them wound up becoming doctors. So when I was growing up and I went to college, like I majored in pre-med because that's just what people did, right? So when we look at decision making, what we tend to do is we don't actually make like objective decisions. We don't really look at all of the choices available to us. We tend to reach for the first thing that is available to us. So like it's kind of weird because there's a good exploration of this kind of thing in who's that Nobel Prize winning economist, Daniel Kahneman. So I think he sort of talks about this. It's important in medicine as well, where one of the things that doctors are trained how to do is to not make decisions based on the first thing that pops into their head, or the second thing, or the third thing, or the fourth thing. So a lot of times doctors make mistakes when they sort of rely on like their first instinct to make a decision. And what we train doctors to do is something called differential diagnosis, which is to think through all of the possibilities before settling on one. So I see this a lot where people are trying to figure out what should my career be. I've tried all this stuff. I've tried switching majors 8 times and it still hasn't worked. What do I do? So I'd say the first thing to do is to take a step back and to really think about, okay, what are all of the possibilities here? Construct a differential diagnosis about how you can spend your time. And when someone says, I can't figure out what my career is, I'd say that's actually too narrow to begin with. Because forget about a career. Like even a career is maybe not like is the problem, is that your mind is coming up with solutions that are already so narrow. So if your problem is that I can't find a career I enjoy, I think part of that problem is because your mind is narrowly chasing options for a career. And by doing so, you may actually miss out on all kinds of things that you could earn like a livable wage with, but your mind won't even consider them because you're locked into this idea of career. Because the problem is that when you think about career, right, like then you start thinking about things like call center. Oh, I can get a job at a call center. I can get a job at a billing department. I can get a job in food service. So you're reaching for the simplest thing, the most available thing, instead of considering all of your options. So what I'd strongly recommend is take a step back from the idea of a career entirely. Even if we look at how we started Healthy Gamer, like this is a mental health startup that's relatively successful, right? Like we're doing some good stuff. We're helping some people, things like that. I did not start out like thinking I'm gonna create a mental health startup and quit my job. That is really not what I cared about at all. It was like, hey, there's like people who are really struggling in a particular way, and I'm going to try to help these people because it seems like no one else is. And so when you're really thinking about what you should do, the first thing I do is take a step back from the idea of career. And so this person was kind of saying everything that I've tried is boring. So then what I'd say is like, take even a further step back and ask yourself the question, if you're trying to find a non-boring career, start by asking yourself, what do you enjoy, and forget about the career. Right? Start to think like, okay, what's something that I'm genuinely interested in? What's something that I enjoy doing? What's something that I, really like kind of am passionate about? When was the last time that I really had a lot of fun doing something? When was the last time I was intellectually engaged? What do I care about? What do I think I can do to make the world like a better place? Like what's some kind of problem in the world that I would like to have an impact on? And you have to be kind of careful here because your mind may go for more what we call premature closure. Because it may say, oh, I'm really passionate about, like equal rights, but I have no qualifications. Okay? And so then what your mind does is it'll say, oh, that's not an option because I have no qualifications. That's a premature closure too. Thinking about a career is also a premature closure. So what we want to do is take a really big step back and then start to think about what you actually care about, what you find interesting. And then once you pick a couple of those things, then what we're going to do is like an investigation based on what you find interesting. And what the purpose of an investigation is a couplefold. The first is like, it's really interesting because I don't know if you guys know this, but like there are professional DMs in New York City that will charge like $400 a week to run like a DMing session. Right? And so you may say to yourself, like, I never realized that was a career. I don't even know if it is a career. But what some people discovered is that, hey, I'm really, really passionate about this. And it does seem like there's a lack of good DMs. So there's actually like people who are willing to pay like $400 a week. You've got like, people who are, maybe investment bankers or whatever, like in New York City. There's like 5 people in the group. They're all willing to chip in $80 a week. And like, that's their entertainment budget. Because if you go out a single night, like you go to dinner and you get drinks in New York City, it's like $200 at a minimum, right? So there's actually like supply and there's demand. And like, I've actually met some professional DMs and it's kind of interesting. You may say to yourself, oh, I never realized that was a career. And like, yeah, because we don't think about that as a career, right? It's not something that people around you are going to be regularly doing, but there are all kinds of niche opportunities for you to make a livable wage doing something that you love. And the key thing to get into that kind of thinking is to step out of the idea of a career. So I'd say start with something like thinking about what do you actually enjoy? What do you care about? What do you like find interesting? And then what you want to do is start to think a little bit about, okay, like how can I pursue this? How can I make this work? And then something really fascinating will happen. So let's say that you're interested in like, equal rights or whatever. Like, then the interesting thing is you may not have any skill set, but as you start to like move towards something that you genuinely care about, the ability to do things that you don't enjoy will become far more tolerable. So the problem right now is that we have a group of people who like go to school and they have no end game in mind. They're not going to school for a particular reason that they're passionate about. This is something in addiction psychiatry that we call a competing interest. So this is a really important principle. If you want to do something that's very, very difficult, you have to have a competing interest. So in addiction psychiatry, if you want to get someone to quit smoking, Smoking offers a strong biological reward. It offers dopamine. It offers nicotine. It offers socialization. It helps calm you down. It's an easy way to meet people. So smoking has all of these advantages. And it turns out that if you want to get someone to quit smoking, you can't just give them information and say, hey, you're going to get heart disease, you're going to get lung cancer, you'll get bad, complications of COVID. All of that information doesn't actually affect behavior. What affects behavior is a competing interest, something that you care about. And once you develop a competing interest, so, my favorite thing in terms of working with smokers, I'll ask them, like, what do they care about, right? What do they think is interesting? And so I had, one patient, and this is sort of the example that I use. So I had one patient who was a smoker, and I tried to explain to him, this is early on in my career. And so I tried to explain to them, I was like, okay, if you smoke, you're going to get lung cancer. Do you want lung cancer? And he's like, no, I don't want lung cancer. Comes in a month later, I'm like, how's your smoking going? He's, oh, I'm still smoking. I'm like, okay, you'll also get heart disease. You'll get stroke. Comes in a month later, and he's like, still smoking, right? So then finally I get to like talk to the guy and I get to know him. And then like it turns out that he's got a daughter and he's like really happy and like he's, he likes his daughter a lot. And then, I even try this sort of thing where it's sort of like, hey, like, if you want to stay alive and healthy for your daughter, like, maybe you should quit smoking. He's like, yeah, that sounds really important, but he still continues to smoke. So then one day we talk a little bit about, oh, would you like to walk your daughter down the aisle one day? And he's like, yeah, absolutely. And then I ask him, when you walk your daughter down the aisle, do you want to be wheeling an oxygen tank behind you? And then he's like, no, right? So like he's got this vision. He's working really hard. He's like trying to be a good parent. He wants to like be there for his daughter. And then it's about finding something that they care about. And once you develop that competing interest, that competing interest, that thing that you care about, then becomes enough to overcome all of the biology, all of the dopamine, all of the nicotine, all of the social aspects of smoking. And then over the next like 6 to 8 months, he actually like quit smoking. And it's all about developing a competing interest. And the problem right now that I see is that a lot of people like find a career because it's logical, it's good on paper. But that logical advantage of like, oh, I should do this and should do this is not enough to actually overcome the suffering that you have to go through for the career. So as you think about what you actually care about, and then you enroll in a school with a purpose, and then even though you don't want to take statistics, even though you don't want to take, philosophy or like intro to chemistry, once you have a good competing interest and you're like, hey, this is something that I actually care about, I want to learn this and this is what I'm passionate about. And then what you do is you align your career behind your passions, right? It's not, how do I find a career that I can enjoy and like your passions are sitting over here? You start by like thinking about what you care about, what you enjoy, and then you try to do like a very systematic process of making it work. So I'd say like if we go back to this Reddit post, we can kind of see it pretty clearly that like, I want you all to pay attention to this. How do I find a career when everything in life is boring to me? I don't think everything in life is boring, right? What we see is that I've tried college and self-study, but I never finished anything. I keep on switching majors and I'm still unhappy. So the real question that this person should be asking is, what are you attracted to? What do you gravitate towards? What do you care about? What do you genuinely enjoy doing? And then be careful because your mind may tell you, oh, you can't do that because X, Y, Z. And the cool thing is that when your mind tells you you can't do that because X, Y, Z, that is actually going to be like your solution. So as your mind tells you you can't do that because you haven't graduated from college, then you know what you need to do. You need to graduate from college. Well, you can't graduate from college until you get into college. Okay, so then it sounds like what we need to do is get into college. You can't get into college without applying to college. Okay, then it sounds like I need to write an application. And the cool thing is then when you write your college application and you write your college essay, if you have that end goal in mind, like when you look at your essay, it's going to be like, why do you want to go to college? I want to go to college because I'm interested in supporting equal rights in developing countries. I want to go to college because I'm interested in esports. I want to study creative writing because I want to be a professional DM. And I want formal training in sort of constructing adventures and storytelling. Like, colleges love seeing unorthodox candidates that have like interesting ideas about what they want to do. Right? It's really fascinating. And what I've found time and time and time again is that people who are able to do this process of taking a step back, really think about what you enjoy doing, think about what you're passionate about, and then if you have to make some sacrifices along the way to get to where you want to go, it works out really, really well. So for this person and everyone else out there who's stuck trying to find a career, what I'd say is like, think about what you're passionate about first. And then try to figure out, how can I make this work as a job? How can I get compensated for doing this? And like literally it was like, I enjoy talking to gamers all day. Like that's what I like doing. I like helping people with their problems. So one way that I was able to turn that into a career is by going to medical school and becoming a psychiatrist. But then I was also like, that's not sufficient for me. I actually like vibing with chat. So what are we going to do? I guess maybe I'll start streaming on Twitch. And like, I don't know if y'all get this, but like I just started streaming on Twitch one day, right? Like I had like 10 people who were viewers, and then we had like 15, and then we had 50, and then we had 200. We were like sitting around 200 viewers for a couple of weeks. And if you're passionate about something and you kind of give it your all and you try really hard, it turns out that I think the world will kind of respond to you like pretty well. And that's why we have professional DMs. We've got people who are like, hey, I really love DMing, and like that's their job now. So what if he doesn't know what he enjoys doing, or he lost interest in everything he used to love like me? So that's a great question. So then the question becomes, how did you lose interest, right? Because that passion is there, it's just buried. And so then I think we'll have a couple of other posts today that may relate to that. But like, interest is something that is not like gained or lost. I think it tends to be buried or not buried. So case in point, like I had COVID the last 2 weeks. So like all of the things that I was passionate about and interested in, I didn't care about, right? Like when you've got COVID, you just don't care about anything. You're kind of anhedonic. Even playing video games and stuff would like not be fun. So then there's a process of sort of uncovering what you enjoy, what you love, like where did you lose sight of it? What made you lose sight of it? There are also all kinds of like physical things that you can do, right? You can take care of your body and then your interest will naturally grow. So you can do stuff like yoga, meditation, eating healthy food, like all of that kind of stuff is going to be good for you. If you go see your doctor, get your vitamin D levels checked, there are all kinds of biological things that can result in a lack of motivation. So you can kind of work on some of those things. And remember that just because you've lost your interest doesn't mean that you can't find it again. You have to really figure out how it got buried.